good day wherever you are and watching today live stream. We're so blessed that you are here with us today. Our subject today has to do with protocol in the house of God. I think it's a topic that many believers I think lack really depth of understanding. In fact, to be very real about this, it's protocol is an issue that our mind is actually constantly fighting. We're always fighting to stay in order because we want other people to be in our order. And so we go into their sector and try to bring them into our way of thinking. And the protocol keeps everything in its proper perspective. We want to talk about that this morning. So thank you again for tuning in to Beth Israel Jeremiah here in Honolulu, Hawaii. We welcome you every single week. Before we get into that topic, I want to talk a little bit about Torah, because Torah has been a subject that I've been teaching from this book that I put together for our world leaders. And Torah is a figure, an individual that had issues that were going to reach far deep into the leadership of Moses. And finally, certain steps had to be taken in order that the story of Korach's rebellion would not succeed, because he wanted to succeed. We had shared that this rebellion could only be fully understood if we view it as a power struggle. The bottom line was that the struggle with Korach was not with Moses. Korach thought it was with Moses, but actually the struggle was with God himself. So God had to intervene and set up a system, because Korach thought that he was struggling against another person. And that is the issue with people who understand the proper channels of doing things and having protocol in place, is that they kind of feel that the other person, what they're doing is not the right way. But protocol calls us to stay where we're supposed to stay. You have the Congress and you have the Senate. Could the Congress tell the Senate what to do? They can't. The protocol is that they stay there and they do what they're supposed to do there, and then the Senate will do what they're supposed to do. And then the third branch is the executive branch, and then the protocol of that executive branch is that he is the commander-in-chief, and then he has the ability to wield a lot of authority and even power. And even if Congress tries to stop him from doing things, he has at least 6 months of leeway to do many things that he would consider needed to be done, even if Congress has passed certain laws. Remember that Congress can only pass the laws, but the Senate has to ratify those laws anyway. And so this issue with Korach presents a problem here. In Numbers 16:11 it says, "Therefore you and your entire assembly that are joining together," and this is another thing, is that birds of the same feather, what they tend to flock together. You'll see that in every venue of life. You'll see it in churches. Certain people gravitate to each other. They're like birds of the same feather. If they're what it's called in Spanish chismoso, which is gossipers tends to flock together, you know. If there are people that just want to pray and seek God's face, they will tend to bind together and flock together. So we have a tendency of flying together with people that we have the mindset with, right? So here it says, "Therefore you and your entire assembly," all these groupings of people that are joining together are against what? God. You see, they were not against the leader. Sometimes we think that we have contention against the leader, but it's never against the leader. It's against God. And we, the people of God, have got to really finally get that straight in our hearts. That our battle and our struggle is not against flesh and blood. There are principalities of darkness, of course, but our battle is not even ours. The battle is whose? The Lord's, yes. So we recognize that if we decide to have contention with one another, our contention is really not with each other, but it's with the Lord. Because we're not supposed to have contention with one another. We're supposed to be caring and loving one another, being of one mind and being of one spirit. So Moses actually has to do something that is very difficult for a leader to do. And today we have to find ways because if we don't find the right way to say something, it could almost destroy the other person. That's how volatile the situation is. That's how the tinderbox is. We should be bold and we should be strong. We should not be so timid and so shy. What about if you really had to face giants in this life, and we're walking around like shaking, I don't know, So we have to kind of word things around and spin them around so that the other person doesn't fall apart. Because the fact is that many people do fall apart. And here we see that Moses has to now do something that many leaders have to do, and he has to disagree with Korach's position. And his position, it is solely now up to God to select who is really going to be the leader, because now, you see, who did Moses select? Joshua, right? Okay, and he selected also Aaron. And he selected also Miriam. So he selected these people himself, not because he wanted to do the selecting. It was because God wanted to do the selecting. But now a lesson and a teaching has to be brought here where God has to step up to the plate. And in effect, Moses at this point has to, I don't know, they call it when someone, a judge that's supposed to judge something, is asked to step down. What is that word that is asked to do? Anyone know terminology? To something himself. Recuse himself. Okay, so he had to recuse himself. In other words, you step down, and our higher authority has to step in, or someone else with authority is going to step in. And so Moses recused himself at that moment and has to now have God to step into the picture. Now, I want to ask you a question. If the leader does the same thing that is leading you and step down, are you willing to face the leader, or are you willing to face God now? Who do you want to face, the leader or God? You want to face the leader because that leader is the one that was put there by Moses, you see? And if you're going to face God, now there's no mercy here. There's judgment here. And I always say this, when you face God because maybe you did something that's wrong, never ask for him to bring justice to the situation, because he then has to move to one side the mercies that he may have given to you, and now he has to come in as a judge and a jury for what you're thinking or for what you're doing. And this is exactly what Moses has to do now. He has to move himself to one side, and God would step in. This is not something that is taught in Christianity. So we bring these baggages with us, and these baggages actually are tormenting baggages. Because I think that Korach was tormented by false thinking. Not only that, but it says here that the entire group of people, a huge assembly that joined with his train of thought, was wrong also. because they accepted what this person was saying. And therefore, I think that that congregation or that group of people was in a state of torment because they felt that they were what? Right, and Moses was wrong. And that is really hugely a torment when you think that your leader is not right. And then you spread it to someone else, and someone else picks it up, and then that person also thinks that this is not right. And pretty soon, man, you got half of the congregation in your side, and everyone is really believing what Korah has started from the get-go. Are we following here this far? All right. So these classes are important because it cuts to the quick. And it deals, I think, in removes the cosmetic and the masks and brings the proper double-edged sword to bring the proper cure or the removal of the cancer. Because there was cancer here. There was a sickness of mind that was going to affect it. They had not yet even come into the promised land, you know. And the promised land is what is really all about, right? Right? We're not even at the feast yet, you know. We're not even at the rapture yet. We're not even yet at the reigning with the Lord for 1,000 years. We are on the road towards Jerusalem. And we need to be of one mind, and Korah was not of one mind. So his mind was frustrated and in torment, and he probably, before he faced Moses, he probably just wanted to quit. But he couldn't quit. Why? Because he went too far. And when we go too far, this tendencies to quit would be, I'm going to lose face if I quit, but I need to find a real excuse, a real reason, a legal reason for why I cannot continue doing what I'm doing. But he could not find one. And he, after all, had already convinced so many people to move in that direction. So Moses disagrees with Korah's position. God has to step up, and now God is going to have to point out and actually do the selecting. The selecting took place, okay? But now God has to again do the selecting. And the system that he used was, he told Moses, put a staff in each of the tribe's camp, and the staff that does what? Blooms, blossoms, that will be the staff that is going to be the leader. And guess whose staff was the one that blossomed, bloomed? Aaron's staff is the one, okay? All right, so God selected Aaron, and God selected Joshua, and God selected Miriam, but he selected them through who? Moses. And here it says now in Numbers 17:20, it shall be that the man whom I shall choose, his staff will blossom. Thus shall I cause to subside from me complaints of the children of Israel. In other words, the complaints that were going on were causing God's anger to rise, and his wrath was going to come strongly upon these people, but because it says, whose staff will blossom, thus shall I cause. So when the staff blossomed, then his anger was subside. All right? So now we have three sides. We're talking about three branches of the government. Right now, the Congress is frustrated, the Senate is frustrated, the president is frustrated, and in this case, it was Korach and the people, they were frustrated. And I'm sure that Moses was frustrated, and God, in some degree that we may not fully understand, he was also frustrated because the people just didn't seem to understand how to accept the leadership that Moses had appointed. It was never God's intent to have to do it this way. Hello? And so now he subsides. And remember, there was at least another time that Moses had to step up to the plate and ask God to please not destroy the people, because God was going to wipe them all out completely because of how they were rebelling against the leadership. Now this passage again is demonstrating to us that God recognizes that the complaints against Moses are really a complaint against him. All right? He said, subside from me. Your complaint against your goals, when it really, they had goals to attain. And they had complaints that Moses, that their goals were not being met. Their ideas were not being heard. The Talmud says that when, and I've shared this with you, when Reuben and Gad later, when they saw the rich land of Israel, they regretted the decisions that they had previously made. And the decision that they had made previously was that they wanted the rich part of the land, remember? But the sadder ending of this particular story is that when the Assyrian king exiled the Jewish people during the time of the first temple, the first tribes to be conquered, guess which tribes they were? Reuben and Gad. So when this is the lesson here, is that Reuben and Gad were trying to do their own thing, trying to grab their own richness because they had their own ideas, but in the end it's going to backfire. And we don't want that to happen to anyone today in our day. This is why these important lessons are here for us, so that we are not trapped into what Reuben and Gad and Korach and all of those people were trapped into, believing that the choices that they are making are the right choices. Okay, so how about if you're Reuben and Gad and you had all these cattle? Wouldn't you want the best of the land, so that the grazing would be sufficient for all of your cows? Wouldn't you want that? You would want that, right? But what about if you're not going to get it? What are you going to do? I'm asking you, I'm not asking Reuben or Gad. You're going to complain, right? And listen, they don't have cattle. We're the ones that have the cattle. We're putting here an argument that you don't know what you're doing. Okay? But did Moses know what he was doing? Yes, because what he was doing was not what he was wanting to do. God gave them the instructions. This belongs to Reuben. This belongs to Gad. This belongs to Dan. This belongs to, all the other tribes. And how can you want to take that which belongs to them? I tell you, we're either going to be a Korach or we're going to be a Reuben and a Gad, and we're going to be in trouble in the future. Do we want to be in trouble in the future? Come out with nothingness, emptiness. Well, the signs that there is something wrong with the body is that there's certain things that begin to take place prior to that, right? They say that pain is a sign of what? That something is wrong somewhere in your body. How about if let's ignore the pain? Hello? You're going to ignore the pain and then something comes up down the future? You know, it's more men than women that don't want to see doctors. Is that correct? Why is that? Because men are more apt to be arrogant. Yeah, men are more apt to believe that they are right. This is why you didn't see a woman Korach come up and do this. It was a man Korach, you know, because men want to be the. And do we have macho guys today? We have guys that are macho. Are there macho guys in religion? Yeah, there's macho guys in religion. Yeah, but you see, that there's certain pains that come prior to destruction. If you ignore those pains, you know, it's like I'm saying that Korach should not have ignored the fact that his frustration, he had to give the right proper attention to the frustrations that he was going through. But he ignored that. Okay, so let's get back here. So when the Assyrian king, the first tribe to be conquered and sent away was the tribe of Reuben and Gad. And it happens to all of us from time to time. Objectively, we can know our priorities, but sometimes we get distracted. We don't want to get distracted. How do we get distracted sometimes? Anyone? We get distracted sometimes because we have a need. And because if we have a need, sometimes we say, God is too busy. Or we say, the rabbi is too busy. I would say if you are a young lady and you're planning to get married, before you even take that next step, at least talk to me a little bit. Because you might just go too far into falling in love with this individual that you won't find the need any longer to talk to me. And what I would usually do is that I says, before you go any further, have him talk to me. And if he refuses to talk to me, that's the first sign that there's some issue here. Yeah. But if he talks to me, then God is going to be in the middle of this entire thing, and it's going to expose something about the guy, you know, that this guy is really not the right person for you. Now, what happens oftentimes in the body of the Lord is that we have too many people that believe that they are the counselors. They are the psychiatrists in the congregation. And the rabbi is too busy, and so we will just interact with each other, and we'll find someone else that will help us in this particular area. I would say that's fine, but before you talk to that person, come and talk to me and ask me if that person is the right person to talk to. Would you like, is that a good idea? Why is it? Because I know practically everyone very well that comes here. And I know the persons much better than even sometimes they know themselves. I don't know how many times throughout the years that people will tell me, you customize that message just for what? Just for me. As if I sat down with them before and I got all of this information so that I could come up here and teach and preach something that exclusively was problems and issues that are in their lives. Not too far from downtown on Nuuanu, we had a 2-story building over there where, was it Zippy's is? Is that Zippy's? Downtown Zippy's? I think it was there, the 2-story white building. We had that building for 5 years. We had it as a rehab center for drug addicts and alcohols. That's school and Nuano right there. Yeah. And then I would come and I would teach a class to them at 9 o'clock in the morning. And they would almost believe and even swear that I have an intercom in there. And I'm listening to everything in my home of what's going on in there, because when I got there, I was teaching everything that was going on there. Now, how could that be that they're so embarrassed because I know everything that was going on there? Well, folks, isn't that the way it should be? That we can know exactly what is going on so that we can really help you out? And when the help comes, you reject the help, you refuse the help, and you think that, I'm wrong, and you're right, Folks, I think this is why he was crucified, right? They refused to accept his teachings. And so we learn here in this class the importance, because if you're going to be a Torah scholar, if you're going to be a rabbi, if you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be some politician in this life, someone that's going to make a difference, then you have to have the proper mind and the proper protocol, and it's got to be in there. And then later on you could come by and say, Rabbi, it was tough going through those classes, but I want you to know how much I appreciate it today. Hello? I have people tell me that all the time, but it takes a little bit of a humble pie, of course, for people to finally come to that place and that point. Now, typically, the Torah presents also a series of progressions from the easiest to the hardest. The Lord says that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with what? Well, you cannot love him with all of your heart instantly, right? And so it's you love him from the first level, and then you increase until you're loving him now with all of your heart. All right? How about the Shema? Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is what? Okay, at first we have many other gods. Maybe we're a god ourselves. And maybe the things that we own are our gods, Money becomes our gods, And as far as me and money, I don't have an issue with that. I use it, but if it's not there, I don't worry about that. He said, I shall supply all of your needs. But what about when it says to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your what else? With all your soul. Are you willing to love him with all your heart? Are you willing to give up your soul? See, that's the harder part, because your soul is your think tank here. Are you willing to give it all up? Because he says to love him with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Are you willing to give up your soul? And are you willing even to give up all your strength? Your strength has to do with resources and finances. And if we're not able to do that, and we just want to love him with all of our hearts, we're really coming up short of the glory of God. For all have sinned and what? Come short of the glory of God. So you say, I don't sin no more, so short of the glory of God does not pertain to me. Yeah, but if you cannot give up your think tank, you're just saying, I love you with all my heart, but I don't love you that much that I'm going to give you my soul too. And I'm going to give you all my resources. I'm going to depend 100% on you. So this actually becomes a form of rebellion. And if it's a form of rebellion because we cannot die to self, I no longer liveth, but Messiah lives in me. And if we cannot die to self, then it also becomes a struggle. A rebellion is really a struggle that we're having with God. This rebellion is really God's, I could put it this way, in Korach's case, it was God's political struggle. He was having a political struggle just like we have a political struggle going on in every capital and every Washington, in Washington, D.C. as well. That political struggle that is going on in Washington is God's political struggle. If it's supposed to be one nation under who? Then it's God's political struggle. And if God put Trump there by the system that we presently have, and people are rebelling against Trump, they're rebelling against God. God recognizes that it is his now responsibility to clarify how the principle works. How the principles work in setting up his, I don't want to call it his political machinery, but his spiritual machinery. How's that? So we learned a little bit about something about the fact that the world thinks that they don't need God because they're so wise. They had all of this technology. But God's technology is an unseen technology. When he said to Jeremiah, I shall put my words into your mouth, he was saying to Jeremiah, I'm going to put my fire into your mouth. And so now Jeremiah has unseen technology in his mouth. I want you to know that this is available for us today. So unlike the incidents, again with the incense, God comes up with his suggestions of the 12 staffs. In order to subside from himself the anger of the complaints, and these were wrong complaints. So the Korach story has enormous historical also implications. It teaches us that one, that the principle of democratic process cannot be applied to spiritual interaction, because the spiritual interaction rises above. Having accepted the spiritual relationship with God means leaving God, or leaving him with the decision-making power. So we learned a week ago or so that when Congress gathered for the first time, they went on bended knees for how long? For 2 hours. And they prayed there for 2 hours. Why would they pray for 2 hours? Because it necessitated them to have him making the decisions that they're going to make for the future of this nation. And out of all of the nations of the world, this one nation here for over 244 plus years or so has had the same constitution. So well was it put together. To question that constitution, we'd have to go back and question them being on their knees and then spending another hour or two doing Bible study. Wow. The choice of selecting the conduits, we are the conduits of God, despite the fact that it is laden with earthly political consequences, accepting those political positions, is not, folks, it is not a power that constitutionally inheres in the Jewish, I would say, the Jewish body politics. The Jewish body politics has a different approach than the American politics, because the American politics has progressively and gradually changed to what we have today. And it's changing in many different ways. What time do we have, anyone? I was going to do about 1 hour today. It's about 11. Okay, we'll do 5 more minutes, and we'll cut this class so we can accomplish the other things. The other thing we're going to accomplish is, cutting it short, is that we're going to make time so the dancers can do their practice, so that you can have the best foot forward in this amazing historic. It's going to be historic because it's going to have more nations coming. Feast of Tabernacles. Let me just see if there's any questions at this time from everyone. And I would just want to thank those that have been watching through live stream for being part of the study today. I hope that you've learned something on God's ways and God's protocol. If you're going to be used by God in the future, some of you may well become politicians, maybe teachers in some of the great colleges or universities anywhere around the world, that you may come into those positions with the fear of God, knowing that you will represent the kingdom of the Almighty God. Have a beautiful Shabbat, and Shabbat Shalom to you.